as my starting point. From there, I want to count my third counterclockwise or third to my right cord. So 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
I would grab that third cord and I'm going to move him to the blank spot. Now the blank spot is now my new starting point. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. Grab that third cord and put him in the blank space. So I'm trying to keep the tension as I do this. You don't necessarily have to rotate the disc. For some people it's easier. But
which one was second?
so it's always starting from the blank space and you just count 1, 2, 3 and then you go to the blank space. You can, again, we're always starting, this is our anchor, this is our starting point. So if you ever put it down, we pick it back up, you'll always be able to start back where you were. So looking at my blank space, I just count 1, 2, 3, take that third cord and move it to the blank space. 1, 2, 3, move him to the blank space.
So
here's my blank space, 1, 2, 3. Move him to the blank space. So it doesn't matter if I spin the disc, I'm still doing the same thing. But I'm always remembering that I'm counting to my right or counterclockwise so that you'll always have consistency. If I start spinning it the other way now, it's gonna mess up my knot. You know, so as we go, Gina, I'll have you reach behind you and grab that disc. I'm gonna pull out my Martha Stewart moment. So after a little while, you'll start to see the cord build. And really, that's all I've been doing. But even though I've stopped, I can pick back right where I was. You know, I would want to add my weight, but then I can just start moving my pieces again and continue to build. So this is a really nice, like, travel-friendly project that you can just put in a bag and take with you when you go. So that's it, really. And we're just going to continue that pattern until we get the length that we want. And that's it. Yeah, so just put the jump ring on that one and then he'll be ready to go. And pliers, the flat pliers, because the fire line is kind of slippy, sometimes it's easier to grab it with this stuff and kind of pull that way too. This is not the best plier. Cool. Then what I like to do, rather than keep tying the same knots on top of each other, I like to flip it, so that the thread then comes around and then I can tie another knot. And I'm going to do this at least 5 or 6 times, but each time I tie a knot, I'm going to flip the piece over so that our threads are coming around and then we don't get knots that become really bulky and high. On the last knot, we'll double, triple knot it just for safety's sake. But like I said, I do this at least 5 or 6 times so that I get like a nice tight seal on the end. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but we just want it tight. Tight is the most important part, because all of this is going to get covered up a little bit later anyhow. So I've gone around about 5 times or so, and then when I'm getting ready to finish it off, I am going to tie a double knot right on top. And for safety's sake, let's go ahead and tie a triple. But if we were to do that the entire time, we would get a very funky long knot that would be really hard to hide. So once I have that tied and ready to go, we'll put a little bit of the hypo cement just on that section to make sure that it doesn't unravel. And we'll let that dry before we do the next step. So sometimes if I had a mistake at the beginning, like I did on this one, I'll start like a little bit below, because I know I had a little boo-boo in the beginning there, so I'll probably whip it right about there.
Okay, and you would do the same thing, right?
Same thing to the opposite side.
Okay.
That sometimes the fire line can be tricky to cut, so I'm actually only going to cut one at a time, rather than trying to double it up. And trimming it pretty close to the knot, but I left like a little bit of a tail. You know, we're not cutting it directly on top of the knot because sometimes it'll cause it to unravel. So I'm just trimming that. And the handouts have all these instructions in them too. Then from here, I'm just gonna gather the ends together, but I am leaving a little section. Like I'm not cutting it directly next to my fire line. I'm giving a little bit of a little tuft there, because that's what we're gonna burn down to seal the end. So when I do this, I never bring my flame to the piece because the flame moves and curves. So I hold the flame steady while I bring the piece into the flame. You have much more control over the fire that way. So I can just kind of roll this in to the end there, and you can see all the ends kind of melting and sealing together. So now I know my weave won't come undone. They're actually like sealed. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So again, we're always going to bring this into the flame, and I kind of like to roll it like this too, so that they kind of melt on top of each other. It gives you a little bit better of a seal. Yeah, so again, I can see that they're nice and secure there. And Gina, you do wire wrapping. Misako, you've taken wire wrapping before too. So, these are first. And right below where we made our little ties, I like to start a little path for my wire. So I start by pushing the sharper tool through, because now I have a little bit of an opening that wire can travel through. If not, sometimes it's a little tricky to get it through there. The wire, it tends to be soft. The one that we're working with is going to be really soft, so it's hard for it to know what to do. So I'm just making a hole with 1 foot of my wire. It should now pass through a lot easier than it would. I'm going to have the wire come all the way through. So I have it essentially kind of folded in half. I'm pushing this against here and making kind of like these little bunny ears on the top. I'm going to squish it down as close as I can. So it kind of almost looks like a little bug. It doesn't really matter which side we decide to do it with, but I grab one side at the very base of the bunny ear and turn it upright. So I have one that's kind of poking up and one that's kind of leaning to the side. The one that's leaning to the side, I'm now going to slowly do 1 wrap around the base of the wire. And now I'm going to bring that wire down over our little fire line piece. See how it kind of came down, and then I'm going to wrap it back up towards the fire line. And for this part, I really don't feel like it needs to be side by side or anything like that. I'm really just trying to get the wire to cover that end there. So we're going to continue to just, and because it's soft, we can kind of just roll it around like this, which is nice. And I just try to do that till I'm able to cover most of what I can see from that. Now, we're going to use the other side and bring it back down as well. So if there's a few little negative spaces, I'm not too worried about it. And I'm just folding it around. Once I get to the end, I like to make a little curve with the round nose before I cut it, so that when I push it in, it folds down just that much easier. And you can even use your plier to kind of shape your wire a little bit if you're trying to get it a little more snug. We can gently tap on the wire and use that to kind of, you know, smooth it down. So there's one more step. Yeah. One more step. So from here, I want to create that loop that was at the base. So I'm going to bend it sideways like a normal wire wrap, using the round nose, create my first loop. And I actually like to spin it around one more time and do a second loop. So I actually will switch it and have it come around one more time. That way I have a double loop at the top, and it's a little bit easier, you know, it's going to be a little bit stronger too. From here, I take that next section and I do one little wrap around this base here, maybe 2, just to strengthen it. You don't want that tiny little piece exposed. And then we can kind of bring this guy back down, cover up any openings we still might see on the other side that we don't like, until I'm kind of happy with how that looks. Again, sometimes it's nice. You can always cut it beforehand too, but again, I like to take the round nose and kind of curve this end down ahead of time so that when I take the plier to push it down, it makes it a little bit easier for that little curve to hide inside somewhere. You know, it'll fold down versus wanting to go
tuck
straight
itself
up.
in, right?
It kind of helps tuck itself in there. And then I can kind of move these around a little bit to whatever I like. That's essentially it. And it's not super perfect. I purposely kind of left it as a more organic look. You know, it's not a super clean wire wrap. It was never meant to be that way.
Okay.
You could probably use crimp ends, you know, something that you could stick on here and cinch down. Because I wanted to be able to have variables where I can do any size, any shape, doesn't matter, and I'll be able to figure out a way to end it. But you probably could, if you wanted to, just use like a little crimp end once you figured out how big of a size. Maybe like a 2 millimeter, 2.5 millimeter, maybe even 3 would probably be a crimp size that would fit. You know, crimp end, they snap on and there's a loop on the opposite side. But I wanted to do something a little more flexible. So that's pretty much it. And then findings, you know, I'll do the same thing to the opposite side. And that's it. We get to the very top. Here, the wires basically need to crisscross. So this one gets bent first. This wraps around it. See how it's coming around? The other one, we just wrapped it to the side. So it was leaning one way. You know, it didn't want to stay in the center anymore because it didn't get wrapped around on that very tippy top part. So I'll just get it started. And then just wrap up. Yeah. So now it should stay